If you're watching this video, you've probably seen the CAGED system all over the internet. Maybe you even know what it is or use it already. If you don't know what it is, don't worry, I'm going to show you in this video. But whatever your situation is, there's a 99% chance you're either doing it wrong or not using it to its fullest potential. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to approach the CAGED system the right way, how to perceive it, what to look for, and how to actually practice it to make the connections you need to become the best guitarist you could possibly be. So make sure you watch until the end because it's really important to get the full picture here to understand every single step. So the first thing that you need to understand is the CAGED system is like step one into building this really reliable, intuitive map of the fretboard. And what it's going to show you is a bunch of chord shapes that cover a lot of ground on the neck that show you very important notes, specifically your chord tones. Your chord tones are just the notes in your chord. So a lot of people, when they learn the CAGED system, they just learn all the shapes and then they're just like, oh cool, now I can play a C chord up and down the neck. But they don't really know why that's useful or what to look out for to make it useful. So I'll walk you through it step by step, but after we find those shapes, we're going to dive into where the root, the third, and the fifth are. Those are your chord tones. The root, or the 1, is your first note from the major scale. The 3 is the third note from the major scale, and the 5th is the 5th note from the major scale. And those 3 notes build a major chord. So all your basic major chord shapes that you play on the guitar, they're built from those 3 notes, the root, the third, and the 5th. Unless you're playing like 7th chords or adding tensions or anything like that, your basic major chord shapes are all 1s, 3s, and 5s, and that's true whatever key you're in. And your chord tones are really good to resolve on or focus on when you're playing melodies or solos or writing guitar parts or writing songs or whatever you're doing, because those notes are in the chord anyway, so they're going to sound really good over that chord. And once you build this map up and down the neck, you can relate everything else that you could possibly pull from to those chord tones. So your triads and arpeggios, your scales, all of that. You'll understand how to use the scale to actually center your ideas around those chord tones, which will make your ideas just sound 100 times better. There are so many reasons why it's really useful, but let's jump in and show you how to actually find these shapes and what to look out for. So CAGED, C-A-G-E-D, represents those open chord shapes that most guitar players learn when they start playing. Like open C, open A, open G, open E, open D. And the whole concept is that we're going to apply those familiar shapes to one chord or one key, which will inherently show us all these pockets of the neck where we can play that chord. So I'm going to do this in the key of F. So the first step is I'm just going to take one of these chord shapes. Let's say my open E shape. I know this is an E chord, and I know that there are E's in this chord because that's the root of my chord, or the 1 of my chord. Remember what we said earlier about how the 1, the 3, and the 5 from the major scale builds your major chord. So I know this E here is built from a 1, 3, and a 5. So at the beginning, I just want to target where my 1 is, where my E is. Luckily for all these open chord shapes, the root, or the 1, is going to be the lowest note in pitch. So here, you can see that we have an open E string in the bottom here. Or on top visually, but in the bottom in terms of pitch. Because that E note is the root of my chord, I know that this chord is E. So all I have to do to find this in F is move this shape up the neck, the same exact shape, all those notes that I just played, move them up the neck until the root becomes F. But all the other notes in the chord have to move simultaneously with that root. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to play this chord without my index finger. I want to free up my index finger, and you'll see why in a second. So instead of playing it like this, I'm going to play it like this. I'm going to use my ring finger on the 2nd fret of the A string, pinky on the 2nd fret of the D string, and middle finger on the 1st fret of the G string. So now my index finger is free, and when I start to move this up the neck, I can also move up those notes that were initially played by the open strings, right? Because if I just move these 3 notes up, the open strings haven't moved up in pitch at all with the chord. So I have to move those up, and what you can do is you can pretend like your index is like a capo, kind of. So as soon as I bring this up a half step, I'm gonna lay my index finger down across the neck, like bar it on the 1st fret. And if I want to keep moving up, I can just move that shape up wherever. Now a lot of you probably recognize this shape. I would imagine most of you watching this video do. It's kind of like the first bar chord that most people learn. And if you see here, if we move this E up a half step, what's a half step up from E? Like if we think about our order of notes, we go C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F. There's no E sharp, right? It goes straight from E to F. So I know that I just moved up an E to an F. If you see that I moved up that root just a half step to become F, all of a sudden this is an F chord. And every other note, I just moved up with it, right? So now I'm playing an F chord. So because we got there from moving up that open E chord, that E-shaped chord, you can call that your E shape or your E shape position. So it's kind of like my E shape F chord. Now all we got to do is do this with all the rest of the open chords as well. So I'm going to do the D chord next. If you think about CAGED, it goes in order, C-A-G-E-D. We just did E, so I'm going to do D next, and you'll see why. They actually connect to one another. So if I take an open D chord, I know with this D chord here, I have a root on the open D string. That's a D right there. It's also important to note that there's going to be more than one root in each of these shapes. Like I also know that there's a D right here on the 3rd fret on the B string. But regardless, I'm going to free up my index finger, right? And play that with middle, pinky, and ring. And then I'm just going to start moving up this shape until I get to F. So if I move this up a half step, I have to account for that open string moving up. So I'm going to put my index finger on the 1st fret there, and everything else is going to also move up a half step. Now I'm playing D sharp or E flat. If I move that up one more half step, I'm on an E, one more, there's F. So now I know a couple things. One, I know this is an F chord, but I also know that the root of my chord is still on this D string and this B string. And in this case, because I know this is an F chord because I just moved it up to F, I know those two notes are F, right? Now from here, what I want to recognize is that there's some overlap between this chord and the last chord I did. They're both F chords, so it makes sense that there would be overlap here. So I'm seeing that they share this note right here on the 3rd fret on the D string. That's in both chords, right? And I just discovered that that's my root, that's my F, right? So I know that within this chord as well, I know I said I had a root here and an F here, but I also have one here. And that connects my two shapes here. So visually, I'm using that as kind of my offshoot point between the two shapes and connecting those together as kind of like an extended shape in my mind. Because that's going to start building out this map that I can rely on for any chord. So I know I have an F chord here. I know I have an F chord here. I know I have a root here, here, and here. I also know that I have a root on the high E string, because if I have a root on the low E string on the 1st fret, the high E string is the same note, right? If I go up a half step from E, there's my F, there's another root, right? Root, 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 root. Next shape, C-A-G-E-D. We're going to go back to C because we just did the D shape, so I'm going to do the C shape now. If I play an open C chord, I'm going to free up that index finger. I'll play it pinky, ring, and middle. I'm going to start moving the shape up until I get to F. So if I move it up a half step, got to put that index finger down on the 1st fret there on the G through the high E string. Now I'm playing a C sharp. Here's D, D sharp, E, and F. So now here's F. Now I want to relate this back to the last shape I did because I just came from the D shape. Now I'm on the C shape F chord. What I'm noticing is that there's actually a lot of notes being shared between those two shapes. These top three here, the G through the high E string, those three notes are in both of these chords, right? Now we'll dive a little bit deeper into those specific notes a little bit later, but I know that I have a root right there with my middle finger here with the C shape. I know that that's an F, and the reason I know that is because I just figured out that that was a root from the D shape, right? Root, root. I'm seeing that root, again, connects the D shape and the C shape. So all these CAGED shapes are going to share roots with one another. They're going to be connected by the roots. And in this case, there's two other notes besides just the root that are being connected. Because we know that the major chord is built from a root, 3 and 5, these other two notes we know are going to be a 3 and a 5, right? This is actually your 5, this is your 3. And we'll go into how to figure that out a little bit later. So far we got these three shapes and they all connect really nicely to one another. Now there's two more shapes. We got the A shape. So if I play an open A chord, I start to bring that up. What I'm going to do is free up my index. This one's a little funky. So when we start to bring this up, like let's say I go middle, ring, and pinky. If I bar that, like that can be tricky to play, so some people play this chord like this. This might look familiar to you, but basically barring your ring finger from the D string to the B string there, and then barring your index from the A string to the high E string. I'm just going to move that chord up till I get to F. So we have A, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, B, and F, right? Now if you notice here, there's a note that's shared between the A shape F chord and the C shape F chord. I'm seeing that note right there on the A string, which is my root again, right? Because I know that like the root of a C chord is here on the A string. I know that's C, right? And I moved that all the way up to F until that root became an F. So I know I have an F there and there. And that shows me my A shape F chord right here. There's the root. Now within this shape, there's also a root right here on the G string. Okay. Some of you may know what an octave looks like on the guitar, when you go across 2 strings and up 2 frets. But that can show you that there's another root there. You can also see that like within the A chord, if you look for your A's within that chord, it'll show you your root because it's an A chord. So I know I have an open A, so that's my root. I know that this is also an A because I got G, G sharp, A. Sometimes you can just hear when the note's the same. Like some people are just good at hearing the octave. You can hear that that's the same note. Same thing up here. The real value in thinking intervallically is that it's all just distances. So as long as the distances stay the same, you have your same intervals in the same spots, regardless of what key you're in. So I know that any A-shaped chord, like if I played one down here, I know that the root of that chord is here and here. And if I played it up here, I know the root of chord is here and here. And then all I gotta do is figure out what that root is, and then it'll tell me what chord that is, right? So I know that this is an A flat, so that's an A flat chord. I know that this note is a D flat, so that's a D flat chord, because I know that's my root. The root tells you what chord it is. So let's continue. There's one more shape. It's the G shape. So I'm gonna free up the index finger, and I'm gonna play this ring, middle, and pinky on the high E string here. And I'm gonna start moving that up. This one's probably the most annoying to play. But you can just bar your index across like a big capo here. And we're gonna move this up until we get to F. So I know this is G, G sharp, A sharp, B, you know, I can move it all the way up. I know personally that like my root is here because that's like a G in the G shape, right? And I also have a root here and also on the open G string, right? So if I can find another F on the low E string, I can actually just move this shape directly there. I know that like there's an F down here, but if I tried to play the G shape down here, it's impossible. So I'm just gonna go up an octave from there. I know that like the 12th fret is an octave up, so if I'm on the 1st fret here, I can go to the 13th fret. There's my F. And I can play that same G shape from this area right here. And that's gonna give me an F chord. So I have a root here of my F, root here on the G string, and root on the high E string. So this, you can see, is really closely connected to the A shape because they actually share these 3 notes in the middle. And your root is right there on the G string. So that's kind of the offshoot there. From there, you're right back to the E shape. Right? This and this connects right back to your E shape, just up an octave. So then the whole map just resets. So essentially what we have is like this connected map of chord tones everywhere on the guitar right now. Because you got F here, you got a root here on the E string, on the D string, on the high E string. You got F here, like D shape, you got a root again on the D string and on the B string as well. Then you got F here, you got a root here on the B string still, then here on the A string. This shows us F here, right? Root there, root here on the G string as well. Then that shows us where to put our index finger for the G shape. It shows us a root there, right? You also got a root on the high E string and the low E string here. And then from there, these 2 roots, that low E string and high E string, show us exactly where to place that first F chord that we started with, that E shape way up here. Root, 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 and we're back, right? So we have F, 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 everywhere on the neck. Now the beauty of this is that map that we just discovered is the same exact map regardless of what key you're playing in. So you can try this in different keys and see if you can find your caged shapes up and down the neck and how they connect to one another in different keys. So let's say I do the key of A, right? I know I have an A chord here, right? I also have an open A here. So I can be like, well, what shape's connected with my E shape? I know that I have a root here and here and here. So I'm going to be on the same strings, the same shape, same distances between those notes. So those are my A's, and I know that I had an A, like D shape A chord that connects to this E shape. So there's another A. I know that this connected to my C shape A chord. There's another A. That shows me the A shape. This shows me the G shape. Then I'm back up. It's hard to play way up there, big chord shape, but then I'd be right back to this shape. If I wanted to go backwards, I could be like, which shape connected to the E shape here on the other side, kind of like the south side, right? So here I would see, oh, my G shape was right there, right? Connected by these 2 roots. And And then that takes me to my A shape, which in this case is just going to be open A. So try this in a bunch of keys. Now the next step is to figure out, because now we know where our roots are, we need to figure out where our thirds and fifths are. Because the more information that we understand that this shows us, the more useful this is going to be when we're actually playing. At the end of the day, what you want to develop, if you want like fluidity and you want free expression, is you want to be able to play what's in your head. And so if you're hearing an idea or you're hearing a note, you want to be able to define intervallically what that note is. So by the interval, what's the distance there, right? Is that a third? Is that a fifth? Because most of us don't have perfect pitch. If you have perfect pitch, you could just hear the note and be like, oh, that's an A, then find A. But for most of us who don't have perfect pitch, and even if you do have perfect pitch, it's good to learn this way, you want to hear the distance. So let's say you're hearing a third and you are able to define that that's the distance that you're hearing. If you know where your root is everywhere on the neck, that would be like step one. Then you can actually find your third from any of those roots anywhere on the guitar. So let's look at how to find any interval, which is going to help us figure out within these chords as well, which notes are the thirds and which notes are the fifths. So like I said earlier, any major chord is built from the first, third, and fifth note of the major scale, or the root, third, and fifth. So when I say the third or when I say the fifth, that's called an interval. And your intervals just come from the major scale, right? Because the third means the third note from the major scale. The major scale has 7 notes, so that means it shows you where your 1, your 2, your 3, your 4, your 5, your 6, and your 7 are. For now, don't worry about anything other than the major scale. If you happen to be looking for an interval that's not inside the major scale, because you know that there's different types of scales, there's minor scales and all sorts of different types of scales. Let's say you're looking for a flat 6. All you have to do is find where the natural 6 is in the major scale and bring it down a half step. Or let's say you're looking for a sharp 4. All you'd have to do is find where the 4 is based off the major scale, bring it up a half step. So by using the major scale, you can find any interval anywhere on the neck. Now you may be thinking, well, I don't know the major scale everywhere on the neck. You don't need to actually know every position of the major scale to figure this out. All you need to know is how the major scale is built. So we'll go through this quickly, but I'm going to show you how a major scale is built so we can use that to help us find where our thirds and fifths are within these chord shapes here. So if I play a major scale just on one string, we'll do F major. We'll keep it in F. There's my first note, my 1. I'm going to play the scale like this. That's just the major scale. So that's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1 again. Those are our intervals. So I'm just going to make some observations about the distances between those notes. Because 1 to 2, that's a whole step. It's 2 frets up, right? We call that a whole step. 1 to 2 is a whole step. 2 to 3 is another whole step. 3 to 4, that's just a half step. That's 1 fret up, right? 4 to 5, that's a whole step. 5 to 6, another whole step. 6 to 7, another whole step. 7 to 1, that's another half step. So I'm seeing a whole lot of whole steps and just 2 half steps. So I'm going to think, well, where are my 2 places where I just did a half step? So some people memorize the pattern of the major scale as like whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. 2 whole steps, then a half step, and 3 whole steps, then another half step. The issue with that is that you're always reliant on the very first note, and if you ever get lost, you have to start all over from the beginning, and you're always just going in order that way. So I like to think of it this way. I like to think it's all just whole steps, except between the 3 and the 4, and the 7 and the 1. If I can remember that, then not only will I pay more attention to what interval I'm actually on at the moment, but if I end up somewhere in the middle of that scale, I don't have to go back to the beginning, to the first note, to figure out what my scale is if I get lost. As long as I can figure out what interval I'm on, I can find the rest of the scale very easily. So because we know where the roots are already in each of these cage shapes here, I'm going to use those roots to help me figure out where my thirds and fifths are, because everything is relative to the root. So here, I have an F chord. I know my root is down here, and I'm looking for this note. I'm like, I don't know what note that is. Is that my 2, my 3, my 4, my 5? Like, I have no idea. So I'm going to use the major scale to help me figure it out. Let's say I don't even know the major scale, but I know how it's built, right? I know that 1 to 2 is a whole step, 2 to 3 is a whole step, 3 to 4 is a half step, 4 to 5 is a whole step, and so on. So I can use those distances to help me figure out what this note is. So if I go 1 to 2, that's a whole step. 2 to 3, that's another whole step. 3 to 4, a half step. 4 to 5 is a whole step. It's like, okay, well, that's not really showing me anything on the A string, right? I need to get here. I can't just keep walking up the low E string. So at some point I have to move across to the A string. So we have to figure out, once we start moving up, like where some of these notes are on the next string over, right? So if I go 1 to 2, and then 2 to 3, it's like, okay, well, I gotta start moving over to the next string. So I wanna see if this note here that I just played is on that next string. Okay, I'm realizing now that the open A string right there is the same as this note I just played on the 5th fret on the low E string. Right, that sounds like the same note to me. So I could just go 1, 2, 3, play the 3 here as opposed to here. So we're calling this note the third, right? 1, 2, 3 in the major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 to 4 I know is a half step. 4 to 5 is a whole step. Right? So I know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is my 1, this is my 5. Now all of a sudden, within this chord, I know I have a 1 and then a 5. 1, 5. And then here, we already saw that's a 1, but let's say we didn't really know. I could go 5 to 6 is a whole step. Now I know what a whole step looks like when I go across to the next string here. 6 to 7 is a whole step. 7 to 1 is a half step. Bam, there's my 1. 5, 6, 7, 1. And not only that, but I'm also kind of teaching myself where the major scale is in that position and relating it closely to my cage shape. So if I start to really connect those two and how they're related, it's like anytime I play this shape, I can start to see the major scale within it. That'll start happening over time. So let's keep going. So we got root, fifth, root. What's this? Well, I know there's a root here, right here on the D string. So if I count up the major scale from here, I could go 1 to 2 is a whole step, 2 to 3 is a whole step. So I'm seeing that's my third. 1, 2, 3, right? Now if I want to find this note here, next note in the chord, I can go from that third and go 3 to 4 is a half step, 4 to 5 is a whole step. Normally that would be right there, right? Open B, but that doesn't sound right. Well, here's the thing about the guitar that's annoying, if those of you who don't know, but the guitar is tuned in fourths, except between the G and the B string. Those two strings are slightly closer together. They're a third apart. So in order to compensate for that, we have to actually move up an extra fret to play the same distance. It's a little bit confusing, but just think every time you're on the G and the B string, the two notes are going to look a little bit closer together. So 1, 2, 3. So I had the 1, the 3, 3, 4, 5. There's the 5, right? So far I've got 1, 5, 1, 3, 5. This one on top, I know it's the root, but I could also go 5, 6, 7, 1. Bam. So now I know this chord is built from a 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. See how it's all just 1s, 3s, and 5s? So that builds my F chord right there. So now we can do the same thing with the next shape. So I know the next shape up is the D shape. I know I have a root right here on the D string. I want to figure out, what's this note here? Well, if I count out the major scale, 1, 2 is a whole step, 2 to 3 is another whole step, 3 to 4 is a half step, 4 to 5 is a whole step, 1, 5, right? Now, what I'm starting to notice is that actually looks familiar. The 1, 5 down here look the exact same. It's like I'm going across a string and up 2 frets. So over some time, you'll start to recognize what these specific intervals look like. You'll start to understand what a fifth typically looks like on the guitar. To me, a fifth looks like a power chord, right? If you guys are used to playing power chords. So I have 1, 5. I know this is also my 1. I could check that by going 5, 6, 7, 1, right? 5 to 6 whole step, 6 to 7 whole step, 7 to 1 half step. So I have 1, 5, 1. So by process of elimination, I know this has to be a 3 up here, because for that to be an F chord, I need a third in there. But to check that, I can use the major scale again. I go 1, 2, 3. Bam, there's a third. So 1, 5, 1, 3 is this chord shape here. I'm also seeing that from the 1 to the 3, it kind of has that same shape that exists here in the E shape. 1, 3, 1, 3. It's like across a string down a fret. Now that's going to look different on the G and the B string because those two strings are closer together, but between every string that's tuned in a fourth, it'll look like that. It'll look like you're going across a string and down a fret. So as an exercise, you can go through each of these next shapes and figure out which interval is where by using the major scale. And there's a lot of value in practicing that. It's going to get your brain working in the ways that you want it to work, to start to look out for the right connections. That's just going to help you understand the guitar neck like the back of your hand. So pat yourself on the back. I know that was a lot of brain work, a lot of thinking. So take a breather. You probably want to take a few days to practice that before moving on here. But the next step would be to figure out your minor cage shapes as well. Now the minor ones aren't actually all possible to physically play, but if you can visualize where those chord tones are, it's just going to help you be able to play in minor keys and minor situations as well. So the one difference between a major chord and a minor chord is the third. So a major chord's built from a 1, 3, and 5, right? We've already discovered that. A minor chord chord is built from a 1, a flat 3, and a 5. So all we gotta do with all these major chord shapes that we know is find where the third is and just flat it, meaning bring it down 1/2 step. So every time there's a third in any of these shapes, if we just bring it down 1/2 step and not change any of the other notes, you're gonna cause that chord to become minor. So if I take an F major chord, the E shape down here, and I see, oh, I have a third right here with my middle finger, after I figured out this is a 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. There's my third. All I gotta do is bring that down 1/2 step in pitch. So it's gonna come down 1/2 step to the first fret here. And you'll see my index finger is right there, ready to pick up that note. So I can just lift off my middle finger, and that becomes a minor chord. So it's like F major, F minor. Now, I'm sure you guys have played this chord before too. The next shape, if I do the D shape, I know this is a 1, a 5, a 1, and a 3. There's my 3. I gotta bring that third down 1/2 step to become minor. So I'm gonna play it like this. Sometimes you have to change up which fingers are doing what here. So I'm gonna go index, ring, pinky, middle, F minor, okay? Next shape, C shape. In this shape, we have 2 thirds. We have a third here, and we have a third here. So technically, we have to bring those both down 1/2 step. So in order to do that, I'm gonna bring that down 1/2 step. Instantly, that gets pretty tricky to play, especially if I also want to bring that down 1/2 step. You can play it if you really finesse it, but this is not possible for most people. So what I would do is I would play it like pinky, middle, index, ring, if you can even get your ring up there. Again, like the purpose of this CAGED system is not to be able to play all these shapes in real time, be able to jam with them. It's actually to show you where your chord tones are so that by the time you are jamming, you can pull from like pieces of them and, you know, arpeggios and like the, you know, scales and things when you want them. So it's not crucial to like actually be able to physically play this, but the more ground you can cover, the more notes you can see, the more it's going to help your visual. So I would try to get this down. Don't worry about getting the high E string in there. Okay, so that's like your C minor shape, or in this case, F minor really. The next shape, the A shape, there's only 1 third in here. It's here on the B string, so I just got to bring that down 1/2 step. I'm going to play it like that, so my middle finger there. I bet some of you guys have played that chord before as well. Now the G shape is actually impossible to play all those notes at once because here we have a third here on the A string and on the B string. And so I don't have enough fingers to actually move both those down and play that full chord. So I'm just gonna worry about bringing this one down 1/2 step. And I'm just gonna skip over the B string and try not to play it. Right? I can even mute it with my left hand if I want. And just play it like that. Or some people just do it like this. So they just worry about the first 4 notes there to show us like where, you know, F minor is. Again, this is more so for the visual to be able to see where your roots, thirds, and fifths are, regardless of where you are on the neck. So what you can do is you can combine these things into one, meaning like you can find all your F major CAGED shapes, right? Then you can go through and figure out where your roots, thirds, and fifths are. And once you figure that out, you can be like, well, now where's the minor shape? If I had to make this minor, all you got to do is be like, oh, well, I know the thirds here now. I can just take the thirds down in 1/2 steps, right? That will show you F minor up and down the neck. And they connect in the same ways, right? F minor still connects by those roots right there, the root here, the root here, and then the roots here. Same map, it's just those thirds are all down 1/2 step. So practice that for a bit and then come back here. But this is my favorite part. This is where we're gonna actually start to take these CAGED shapes through chord progressions. This, in my opinion, is the absolute best way to practice CAGED. Honestly, to practice most things is to take them through chord progressions, but I'll show you what to look out for and how to actually approach this. So I'm gonna pick a very simple chord progression to start. I'm gonna pick a 1 to a 4, meaning the 1 chord to the 4 chord. In this case, we're gonna go G to C. Now, a couple things we have to understand here. I know I've been using intervals and numbers to describe specifically the notes in each chord, right? The 1, the 3, and the 5. But they can also describe the actual chords themselves. So in the key of G, for example, you have a 1 chord, you have a 2 chord, a 3 chord, a 4 chord, a 5 chord, a 6 chord, and a 7 chord. Basically, those chords are built from the root note that I just called out. So like the 1 chord is built from the 1 in the scale. The 2 chord is a chord that's built from the 2. Right? right? The 3 chords built from the 3. And I could go into that more in depth, but that's a topic for another video. For now, just understand that you can use those numbers to describe the actual chords that are built upon those roots in the scale. Now, some of those chords naturally happen to be major and some of them happen to be minor, just depending on where they are in the scale. In this example, we're going to go from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, which are both major chords in a major key. So because my 1 chord is G, first I want to find all my G CAGED shapes up and down the neck. So I got one here, I got one here, here, just that same map, right? I have them everywhere. Now from each of those G CAGED shapes, I'm going to find the closest 4 chord, or in this case C chord, that keep me in that same position. So finding the closest ones, so that I don't have to go G, C, G, C, G, C, and back and forth and jump everywhere. So because I know that I'm going from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, I can take the roots of each of those chords. Like I know that this is a G chord, I can take the root, and I can understand, well, if I'm going to the 4 chord, the 4 chord is built from the 4. So if this is the 1, where's the 4? Well, I could count up the major scale to find where the 4 is, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to say, hey, that's the root of my 4 chord. So I'm looking for my 4 chord, and I know that's the root. So all I need to do from here is remember or visualize which CAGED shape had the root right there on the A string. And there's 2 answers. There's always going to be 2 answers because each root connects 2 CAGED shapes. But here I know that my A shape had a root on the A string. So I can play that A shape in relation to this note and this root, and therefore I'm playing my 4 chord, or in this case my C chord. And you see how closely related that is to this chord? It's just right across, and I don't have to jump up from here to here. Now over time, what this is going to show you, like once you dive deeper into this, which again is something for another video, but it's going to show you like if you're playing over a chord progression that's going G to C or 1 to 4, instead of having to like jump in these boxes and then do that same thing up here and jump up to C, do the same exact thing. Right? It's like, that's boring. You don't want to play the same idea in G and then move it up to C and just, those are your only 2 sweet spots. So if I wanted to play in G here and then play C stuff in the same area without having to jump up, right? I can access that right there, and I don't have to feel like I'm, jumping back and forth all the time. Cool. Let's do this in the next position. So we got the D-shaped G chord next. I know that the root of my G chord is here, so I want to target the roots first. I'm looking for the 4 chord, so this is the root of my 1 chord. I can go up a 4th to find the root of my 4 chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I know that the root of my 4 chord is going to be here, so the root of the chord I'm looking for is right here. Now let's say that's not ringing any bells. I'm like, I have no idea what the CAGED shape is that has the root on the G string, right? What I can do is use this note to find another root. Be like, well, I know what an octave looks like. Those are the same note. Or I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. There's my octave, right? So I know those are both the root of my 4 chord. I know that if I have a note on the high E string, I have that same note on the low E string. To me, that's starting to ring a bell of like the visual here, showing me, hey, this is my G shape. So I have 1 chord, 4 chord, right? G, C. And what I'm visualizing is 1, 4, 1, 4. But you can also see that here, 1, 4, 1, 4, right? The root of the 1 chord right there, going up to the root of the 4 chord. Right, however you want to visualize it will help. Now, what you can also do is be like, well, I know that within this chord here, this G chord, I have a root, 5th, root, and 3rd. So if I want the root of the 4 chord, or the chord that's built on the 4, I know that the 4 is just a half step up from my 3rd. So if I can see my 3rd, I can just go up a half step. That's going to show me the root of the chord that I'm looking for, because that's going to show me my 4, right? I can also be like, well, I know I have a 5th here. How far away is 4 from 5? It's just a whole step below 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 4, I can go down a whole step. There's the root of the chord I'm looking for in this case, like the 4 chord. There's C. So G, C. And again, that'll help us play. If we wanted to play like over a 1 to 4 progression, like there's G, here's C. G again, and C. We can access those chord tones all right there. Let's finish it out. So the next G CAGED shape is going to be the C shape here. I know I have a root here and a root here. And I have a 3rd here. So I'm just going to be like, well, there's my 3rd if I'm looking for the root of my 4 chord, because I'm looking for my 4 chord. I'm going to go up a half step from there. There's the 4, okay, the root of the 4 chord. I know that if there's a note there, I have the same thing, an octave down, an octave up. That's showing me my E shape here, right? also be like, well, here's the 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's the root of the 4 chord. If that's not showing you anything, then you could go from a different one, right? Here's the 1 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's the root of my 4 chord. So now I know I have a root of the 4 chord here, and then since high E string, low E string as well, it's like, oh, it's showing me E shape here. Next one, G right here, here's the root, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, there's the root of my 4 chord. Which CAGED shape has the root on the D string? Well, how about the D shape? So G, C, G, C. That has that same sort of a cross motion. So a lot of this is going to look like you're just going right across because the guitar is tuned in fourths. Next one, G shape. Going right across to my 4. C shape. G, C. This is G, C, G, C. So this process, don't rush it. It takes a while to really understand and really see all those connections. But the more connections you can make, the more comfortable it's going to be over time. The more useful it's going to be. So once you find the shape, you don't want to stop there. You want to see what's another way I could have found this shape. Because if you have only one way to find something, if for whatever reason one day you're not seeing it, you don't have anything else that can help you find that shape. And you just have to hope that you remember it. And that's not a really good strategy. So I like to think of a bunch of different ways that I could visualize or understand something, so that if I forget like 2 of those ways, or I'm just not seeing it in that moment or whatever, the other ways will help me see it. So here, let's say I'm so used to just seeing that as going 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's like how I'm seeing it. What I also want to see is, well, what other connections can I make as I go from G to C, or the 1 to the 4 chord? Well, I like to see the 3rd, like I mentioned before. I know that I have a 3rd there, and that can show me my 4 if I just go up a half step. That shows me the root of my 4 chord, right? So that's another connection I can make. Here's another one. I'm seeing that as I'm going from the 1 to the 4, the root of the 1 chord right there on the D string is actually also in the 4 chord. Right, that note is there for both chords. So I can be like, well, actually, there's a G inside the C chord, or there's a 1 of my 1 chord inside the 4 chord. It's just serving a different purpose. It's not the 1 anymore when we play it in the 4 chord. It's actually the 5th of the 4 chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it's the 1 of the 1 chord. And I'm saying a lot of numbers. So I understand if some of this is going over your head, guys. I want to give you as much information as possible so that you can go and make these discoveries for yourself, and they're here so you can reference them. Rewatch this video as many times as you need, slow it down, take it in chunks, you know. But basically I'm just trying to see like what connections can I make between 1 and 4. And that shows me that there's a common tone. We call that a common tone when there's a shared note between the 2 chords. And so when I do that here, 1, 4, I'm seeing the same thing. It's like this root here, this root of the 1 chord is also inside of the 4 chord. It's the 5th of the 4 chord. So it's just helping me like see that shape and that move clearer. The more connections I make, the clearer that shape. So you're not done once you find the shape. There's more work to be done after that. You have to go in and discover how else could I see how these are related. Now finally, you can take this through more complex chord progressions that move around more. So you can basically reference like your favorite songs, right? And let's say there's a song that goes, you know, G, E minor, C, D. If you kind of analyze that to be like, oh, that's the 1 chord going to the 6 chord, going to the 4 chord, going to the 5 chord. Basically, the 1 chord's major, 6 chord's minor, the 4 chord's major, the 5 chord's major as well. Then you can find that everywhere based off each CAGED shape. So I can find that here. 1, 6, 4, 5. Finding the closest shapes between the 1, the 6, the 4, and the 5. Finding the closest shapes in that position. Like they all keep me in that sweet spot there. Here, 1, 6, 4, 5. Right? It's kind of funky. 1, 6, 4, 5. 1, 6, 4, 5. Last one. 1, 6, 4, 5. And each position is going to show you the chord tones of those chords. And again, you want to think in intervals and distances and find these through the intervals. Like if you're looking for the 6 chord, here's the 1, you can go down 1, 7, 6, there's the 6, or you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just using those intervals and those distances is going to help you understand the language fluently the way that you need to help you actually play better. You'll start to see all these connections being made on the fretboard, and the guitar is going to start making a lot more sense over time. It takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of work to make those connections. But if you practice it a lot, you'll get there. So take your favorite songs, find the CAGED shapes in each position, and then you can play play along to your favorite songs with those CAGED shapes. And then you can start to mess around with some improvising there, like try to fill in the space in the middle. Right, things like that. But give it some context, you know, play. You can write songs using different CAGED shapes that you're not used to get them to like come out and get your brain to like really make sense of them and give yourself a specific application for them. But if you do this, you will start to build a really solid foundation, not only visually, but also just an understanding of where everything is and how everything connects. And over time, that's going to catapult your playing to new heights. Now, obviously, once you build that foundation, you want to add on top of it in the right ways and follow a certain path, right? So check out the description of this video to see how I might be able to help you do that on a deeper level. And also, I know certain concepts in this video we didn't like spend a lot of time on, like diatonic chords, like the 1 chord, the 2 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, and some other things throughout. I wanted to keep it manageable in terms of length and focus mainly on the CAGED system here. So if you have any questions, leave a comment below. Even if you don't have questions, leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to my channel because I'll be posting a ton more educational content for you guys. All of that really just helps me out so I can keep making videos like this for you guys. Go ahead and start practicing this in chunks. Rewatch this video as many times as you need. Use it as a guide, as a reference, and I will see you in the next one.